Hello everybody, Mr. Peoples here, and today we're going to be talking about America becoming a world power. Before we start, of course I have a joke for you. What do you call a pig that knows karate? A pork chop. Alright, let's get started with our learning targets for today. The learning target for today is I can describe the difference between isolationism and imperialism. We'll actually start with the definition for those two things today and get them in your notes so that you can't forget them. Second learning target for today is I can describe why the United States built the Panama Canal in the early 1900s. All right, let's start with isolationism. Isolationism, I see the word isolation in it. Usually when someone is isolated, that means they're by themselves. In this case, isolationism is the policy of a country avoiding involvement in the affairs of other nations. So a country that says we're not going to get involved in other wars, we're not going to take part with other things with other countries, we are going to focus on ourselves. Now on the other side of that, you have imperialism. Imperialism is building an empire by founding colonies and conquering other countries. Britain did this when they founded the American colonies. The 13 colonies, when they sent British people over to this area that eventually became America, that's what they were doing. They were building an empire. Okay? And countries like Britain and Spain and France and other countries around the world have been doing this for years. Okay? It was called imperialism. Now, the United States was isolationist until the late 1800s. One of the last things that George Washington said when he was president, right before he ended his time as president, he said that the United States needed to stay out of the affairs of other countries, and they needed to worry about their own country. And so President Washington, our first president, believed that the United States should remain isolationist. And it was that way until the late 1800s. After the Civil War, as immigrants start coming into America through Ellis Island, that's about the time things start to change. The United States began to gain territories to expand its power and to try and keep its economy strong through trade. The government wanted to keep up with the European powers like Germany and Britain, who had large, wealthy empires, and they were trading and using the resources of these other countries. So the United States expanded west across the Pacific. The United States military and trading ships needed a safe place to refuel. So places like Alaska was colonized, or bought, I should say, was purchased by the United States in 1867. Hawaii, the island of Hawaii, was basically taken by the United States. The Midway Islands and the Samoa Islands become U.S. territories. Alaska and Hawaii don't become states until 1959. They're our last two official states. The Midway Islands and the Samoa Islands are still territories today. They are American territories, but they are not states. Here on this map, you can see where all of those islands are located. You can see Alaska, Hawaii, Samoan Islands, and then some of the other islands that are part of the United States at different times as well. Okay, let's talk about Alaska. Alaska was purchased from Russia in 1867 by the Secretary of State William Seward. Now, this is 2 years after the Civil War. Remember, William Seward was the man who was stabbed the night that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. He was laying in his bed, and one of the assassins tried to kill him, but wasn't able to because of the iron brace around his neck. 2 years later, he's the guy that is purchasing Alaska from Russia. Most Americans thought that it was a big mistake. Matter of fact, the newspapers called Alaska Seward's Folly. But then, years later, they found gold and oil in that area of Alaska, and Alaska became a very valuable place with natural resources that the United States economy could use. And so it ends up being a steal of a deal from William Seward that he got from Russia. Now, Hawaii is a different story. Americans came to Hawaii in the early 1800s, and they became very rich growing sugar on that island, or on those islands. The sugar planters eventually forced the Hawaiian king to give up his power and give that power to the sugar planters. This way, the planters could become more wealthy. And eventually, the planters helped the United States take full control of Hawaii in 1898. And then in 1959, it becomes a state. The United States began to have more contact with other countries during this time period that we've been talking about. The United States started to trade with Japan and China in the late 1800s. One of the nice things about this was that no other countries traded with them. And so the United States saw an opportunity to make money by trading with Japan and China. And the United States introduces modern technology to both of those countries. Now, one of the problems is that the United States, if they wanted to trade with those countries, a lot of our factories and things were on the East Coast, and those countries were all the way on the other side of the world. And so it really would have been helpful if there was a faster way for the United States ships to get over to those countries. So the United States took over building the Panama Canal in 1904. President Roosevelt signed this order into action, and the land that was used for the canal was bought from Panama to build this canal, but that eventually would connect the Atlantic Oceans and the Pacific Oceans. President Roosevelt wanted an easy way for ships to pass from one ocean to the other. The canal cut 8,000 miles off the voyage of ships going from the West Coast to the East Coast, and President Roosevelt also wanted a strong military and a strong navy. And so by having this canal, it gave the United States Navy an opportunity to move from one coast to the other very quickly. So there was also a military reason. Here you can see 8,000 miles is cut off the trip here just by going through the Panama Canal. Ships could pass easily through it instead of having to go all the way around South America. Here is a view or a picture of the locks that were being created there. First thing that had to happen was a man-made lake was created by damming up a river. And then they had to create these locks that would bring ships from sea level up to the man-made lake, and then when they get through the canal, down back to sea level. So these locks are like ship elevators, basically. And I'll show you in class what these things look like. What you're seeing on the picture here is a picture of these locks being made on the Panama Canal. The work on the Panama Canal was dangerous. Matter of fact, the French tried to do it first, but so many people died from disease, specifically spread by mosquitoes, that they gave up. The United States decided to take it over. One of the things the United States doctors figured out was that mosquitoes carried these diseases, so they went to war against the mosquitoes. They got rid of all of the standing water, any place that mosquitoes could live and breed. Those doctors got rid of it. And when that happened, it was now safe for the workers to work in that area, that canal area. But the other dangers still were there. Using dynamite to blow up the rock to create the canal. Dynamite isn't very stable in hot and humid weather, and that weather in Panama is exactly that, hot and humid. So the dynamite would sometimes just explode without warning. So that made it very dangerous, and about 6,000 workers died. The canal took 10 years to build, and it was finished in 1914. It cost $375 million. Now, President Roosevelt wanted to make sure that European countries stayed out of Latin America, out of South America and Central America. He believed that if European countries were trying to get into those countries, that they would eventually threaten the United States. And so Roosevelt wanted to make sure that the United States was the only one dealing with those Latin American countries. And so what he did is he made those Latin American countries who owed a lot of money to European countries, the United States paid all of the debts for Latin America so that the Latin American countries would owe the United States, not European countries. The United States wanted to be the only power the only military power in the Western Hemisphere. Here's a great cartoon that shows visually, kind of in an exaggerated way, Roosevelt's foreign policy. You can see Roosevelt kind of marching through a shallow puddle of water. Well, that puddle of water is the Caribbean Sea. And you can see him taking his toy boats, which are the military, all around these Central and South American countries. Like he's in control of it. One of Roosevelt's most famous sayings was, speak softly and carry a big stick. What that meant is that sometimes you don't have to be all loud and angry. You can speak very softly as long as you show that you have a strong military. That's the big stick. And so here you can see him carrying his big stick along with him on his little tour of the pond. So the stick represents U.S. military force, and the vessels are warships because Roosevelt wanted to show his power so those countries would pay their debts. All right, again, your two learning targets here were, why was the Panama Canal built in the 1900s? It was built so that we could cut the distance from the East Coast to the West Coast. We can get ships faster to areas like China and Japan. And then the difference between isolationism and imperialism. Isolationism is not trying to create an empire. It's being focused on yourself, whereas imperialism is creating an empire and taking over countries and conquering countries. All right, have a great day, and we'll talk to you another time.